like I said. You could walk down to Harris. You could see Louie and Keely in an open lounge right there. You could walk up to Harold's. You can go up to the 7th floor in Harold's Club and see all the big-name entertainment there.
And then the coffee shop was the big place in the morning. Everybody came to the coffee shop. Everybody met everybody else in the coffee shop of the Mapes.
It was a hot spot.
Yes, a hot spot.
And the coffee shop was a center of activity during the day, coach room during the cocktail hour, and the Sky Room at night. But the Sky Room is what gave it the glamour and the excitement.
Well, the Sky Room was on top of the hotel, seated about 500. It was a typical nightclub that you might have, like the Copacabana in New York, you know. And in the old days, he had a dance band and a show, a good show, a big name entertainment. And you go up there and have dinner, and you dance and see a show, which, you know, that doesn't happen anymore.
Sky Room was a way of life. You have no idea now the way they do it. You come in, you have a show, you have 2 drinks thrown at you, and you get no other service. I served you dinner, drinks, and all while they were on. And I made them do a different show for the second show. Because somebody got stuck in the crap table, we wanted to keep the family there and show them something different. And they all came in to mix. And they would come to the table, and if it was a comedian, he'd entertain you. If it was somebody like Lily St. Cyr, she would be a siren for you. And they loved it. They loved it.
It was so elegant because you got dressed at night, and if you were going out for dinner, everybody that used to come in would be wearing, at that time, furs and fancy dresses, and the men would always wear a tie or sometimes even tuxedos, and they'd go there for dinner. It was a dinner show, and they'd have dinner, and they'd watch these wonderful stars. They had chorus girls, big orchestra.
Right.
Oh, it was so beautiful up there, and you could see all over Reno, the city, and we just loved it. The people were very nice to work with. And we always had such a good time. It was sort of a family thing, you know. Everyone knew everybody, and it still was a small town then. So we got to know people that were regulars that came in for every new show, and it was just a lot of fun.
And if you remember, the star of one of the most famous Sky Room shows wasn't really an entertainer, and definitely not glamorous.
The Mapes got its first worldwide publicity internationally in 1958. A fellow named Paul Anderson had won the Olympic gold medal in weightlifting at the Russian Olympics, wherever the 56 Summer Olympics were held. And he beat the Russians, first American to ever do it. So I got a call from Mapes, which I did every 10 days, telling me who the new show would be in the Sky Room. And he said, we booked a great guy. And I said, who's that? He said, Paul Anderson. I said, well, does he sing, dance, what? He said, no, he's a weightlifter. I said, well, you know, are people going to pay to watch a guy sweat and lift weights while they're eating dinner? And he said, well, we don't know, but it's exciting, you know, because he's an international celeb. Plus, he works cheap. I said, it'd be nice if we could put him on the Ed Sullivan Show, which was very big then. And our booking agent happened to know the producer of the Ed Sullivan Show. His name is Pierre Cosette, who is also a producer on Broadway Today. So he said, I'm going to New York. I'll see if we can work a deal. And sure enough, we did 7 minutes live from the Sky Room in 1958 on the Ed Sullivan Show. CBS paid for the whole shoot. We had to fake the show because it was 5 o'clock here, 8 o'clock there. But it was a tremendous success, and the name Mapes went around the world as a result of that.
In the hours before appearing in the world-famous Sky Room, many of the entertainers would simply ride the elevator to Bob and Betty Stoddard's KTWD radio on the 2nd floor of the Mapes for an interview with Betty.
Like I had Max Baer, and he came into the studio one day in our Mapes studio, and he pounded on the glass behind where I was sitting, you know, to broadcast. And, of course, you could hear him all over the whole Mapes. And he says, "The bear is here," pounding and pounding on the door. So we had quite an interview with Max Baer. Peggy Lee came all dressed up, and I said, "Well, Peggy, this is radio, you know, you're all dressed up." She says, "Well, I dressed up for you, Betty." And, I mean, we had Peggy Lee many, many, many times. That was KATO in those days. Later on, Bob renamed the station K-Bet, and it was named for me. People thought it was for the betting, you know, that goes on in Reno, but it was for me. And very few girls have had radio stations named after them, so I'm very pleased about that.
And on one occasion, I asked my dad, I said, "Well, what's the arrangement here with the Mapes Hotel and you and Charles as far as money's concerned and how this operation works?" Because I was understanding how a radio station operates. And he had mentioned to me, he says, "Well, Charlie and I go back to 1947 when you were born. We moved into the Mapes Hotel, and Charlie and I, on a handshake, agreed that I would bring my studios in here, and on the air every day we would mention about being in the mezzanine of the Mapes Hotel broadcasting." And that agreement went on forever, and it never changed, ever.
That was the old days when a handshake did it.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Charles was kind of like he was a cowboy. He liked horses. He loved horses. And of course, he was raised on the ranch, you know. And he loved entertainers. You know, he was a great guy to work for. We had, you know, a lot of little squabbles, but nothing. I always loved him, and I think he always loved me. And he turned out to be my best friend. He put up with my 3 boys when I went through their divorce, and they lived in a hotel with me for years. And he put up with that, which made him a prince just for that.
For many years, while Al Bello worked as entertainment director of the Mapes, his 3 young sons lived in the hotel with him, probably the first and last kids to be raised in the hotel.
And I remember it was our job and goal to ruin Mr. Mapes' life and his hotel. No, the hotel was beautiful back then. We were little kids, and you know, the gambling and the backstage with the shows, and you know, it was our home. It was our playground. You know, we spent a lot of our time there. The first time we ever went down to the laundry chute, it was very funny. There was Mapes, you know, catching us doing. It seemed like every time that we would do something, Mapes would always be there. It was a joke. You know, we would always be doing things, but we were doing so much stuff all the time that it was probably a coincidence. But he was always right there, you know, there he was shaking his head. "You kids, you know, you Bello kids," you know, it was funny. You know, you would think a casino back then would be a terrible place for a child to grow up, but it actually wasn't. It was like more of a family, down-home country kind of thing. Everybody looked out for us, you know, and that was our home growing up, Mapes Hotel, and it was great.
Hollywood producers had shot movie location scenes in Reno for years, but nothing quite compared to the sensation caused by the arrival of the cast and crew of the Misfits.
I was at home asleep, as a matter of fact. About 11:30 at night, the phone rang, and it was Walter Ramage, who was the manager of the hotel. He said, "You have to get down here right away." I said, "What's wrong? Is the hotel on fire?" He said, "No, but you have to come down." I said, "Can't I wait till the morning?" He said, "No, you got to come down." But he wouldn't tell me why. So I got dressed and met him in the lobby of the Mapes.
When Harry went down there, Walter met him at the front door of the hotel, and he said, "They're going to make a movie in Reno, and it's called The Misfits." And he said, "The whole crew and their lights and their cameras and the whole thing have just checked in to the Holiday Hotel. Now," he says, "we're going over, and we're going to move the entire crew from the Holiday Hotel over to the Mapes."
And so what he did was Ramage had caught wind of it, taken them to dinner that night, sold them a better deal, moved the entire operation to the Mapes. And as it turned out, it was even better than we thought it would be, because they stayed there for a full 6 or 7 months, which was going to be a 90-day shoot. So we had them through the summer. And a tremendous piece of business, because a lot of the big people like John Huston were great gamblers too.
The one thing I remember, Houston got mad at the Riverside because he was a big gambler, and he gambled a lot at the Mapes. And he says, if I catch any of you in there, I'm going to make it off bounds. Well, hell, there was no other place to go except Harold's Club. So I thanked him for that because I got all their business. Marilyn was a fascination to me. She was like a little girl. And the terrible thing was that when dessert would come, she'd open her pocketbook and put all these pills in a row. She said, you have to excuse me, I've got to take these so I can go to sleep. But if she met another woman, she'd talk about how that woman put up her hair. She didn't want to talk about leading men. She didn't want to talk about pictures. And Clark Gable would walk out of the room. Hell, that was work for him, but he'd talk about anything but pictures. Montgomery Clift was a little offish, and I didn't get to see too much of him, but he was a very much of a gentleman. Eli Wallach was always on, telling a joke, and you couldn't help but like him.
They had world press. There wasn't a publication, newspaper that did not send a correspondent to the Mapes during that 6 or 7 months. Paris Match, UPI, Reuters, Time, Life, on and on.
On December 17, 1982, exactly 35 years from the day it opened, the Mapes Hotel slipped away, a victim of the growth it had begun. Despite the many lives it had touched throughout the years, the era of the Mapes was over. The once opulent and grand hotel now sits empty, its future uncertain.
It was just a different time. I mean, now it's different. And they're tearing it down now, or they're, talking about tearing it down. Oftentimes, I actually wish that they could somehow save the building because it's a historical landmark and it's part of my childhood. And
it would be a shame to tear it down because it has a uniqueness. They spend millions of dollars to make a hotel unique in Las Vegas. Uniqueness is already built into the Mapes. Plus, it's a National Historic Monument. But it emblazes the real start of Reno, from a sleepy little railroad town to what it is today. It was my first big job. It's named after me. I spent 40 years operating it, and it's the biggest thing, other than my lovely wife, that has happened to me in my life.
Harry Spencer calls it the Grand Old Lady of Virginia Street, and she was the Queen of Virginia Street.
Well, every time I pass it, I just think of all the fun we used to have, and it was just a joy to go to work. I couldn't wait to get to work.
It's a time that I'll certainly never forget, and I don't think Joanne will ever either, because it's just a wonderful time for Reno, and just a wonderful time to be in the world. It really was good.